And we are live, finally, for episode 137 of Trek Live. Uh, Apologies for yesterday. We tried to do this at our normal time, Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We had some internet struggles, some subspace transmission issues. Uh, so here we are tonight with some issues resolved and hopefully in a better position to talk about Star Trek Beyond, which is what we're excited to do this week. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm kind of chomping at the bit. I got my hopes up yesterday to talk about this, so now I'm really excited to finally, like you said, to get talking about some Star Trek Beyond. So
Yeah, I'm really excited to delve into Beyond 2. On Trek Live, we try really hard to divvy out the topics and not get into too many, like, routine rhythm, habits of, like, going back to the same show over and over again. We want to try to space it out and do Enterprise and TNG and TOS and all the shows. And in our minds, that includes the Kelvin timeline. And it's been a while since we talked about anything that really related to the Kelvin timeline specifically. And Star Trek Beyond is a unique case, I think, because it's so new. It's only a few years old, but I think one of the things that really had me wanting to talk about it was I feel like it had a very shortened moment in the sun with
yeah,
having come
it
out
did.
in the
It really
summer.
did.
Yeah, it came out in summer of 2016. Very, very shortly after it debuted, the buzz for Star Trek Discovery was loud and very dominant in the community. I think Beyond went well. I think people liked it generally when it came out, but I think pretty quickly after it arrived, we moved on to like getting ready for Discovery and all the new TV stuff. So, with a few years of hindsight and some time away from it, I was really eager to look at it again and have you look at it again too, Dan, and just talk about it with some fresh eyes. Um,
Yeah, it really never got its day in the sun. It didn't get the when you compare it to the previous two Calvin Timeline movies, it really didn't get as much spotlight as the other two. Um, whether that be for better or for worse, I don't know, but I think it's nice to be able to come back and revisit it, like you said.
Definitely, yeah. I think '09 and Into Darkness certainly having sort of a monopoly on the Star Trek conversation for the years that sort of surrounded their releases. They were big blockbuster. Beyond was too, but I think '09 and Into Darkness had a different level of reception and certainly had a more dominant footprint as far as the impact on the Star Trek community for a longer period of time. So Beyond certainly an interesting case study of something new and fresh, but I think we've all kind of moved on from it with Discovery right around the corner. From when it came out. So you just rewatched it for I believe the first time in quite a while, right? Like in the last.
Yeah, do you want to just jump into it, or do you want to do a rewatch recap, or do you just want to just dive right into it?
Let's jump in.
It being a weekday, I think we should just you're right,
Yeah,
just
I
jump
think
into it.
we kind of. I don't really have a rewatch recap to share. I don't. You probably do, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But let's let it build up a little bit, and when we come back
Okay.
with more live, we'll have a big chunk of Deep Space Nine season 2 to talk about, and so we're gonna jump right into Star Trek Beyond. Typically, for those, I think we have some new viewers with us this week. Maybe it's the different time slot. Maybe it's Star Trek Beyond being cool and new. I don't know. But welcome to AKA Maymel. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Rob, who is a very loyal viewer and listener and participant in Trek Live, is in the room too.
Which he needs to go to bed, but
He does. It's
yes.
very late there. We
Carry
very
on.
much appreciate
Yeah.
you hanging up with us to talk about Beyond. We typically do start out with talking about what we've watched recently in our rewatches, or even if like there's a one-off thing. But we're gonna jump right into the topic of the week with Star Trek Beyond. So yeah, you had your first rewatch in quite a while. I did too this past weekend, leading up to our discussion here today. What was your overall impression watching it again for the first time in a while?
I absolutely loved it, which I did when it first came out. But a little bit of a backstory. I am technically part of the Kelvin generation.
You are.
I don't know if that's a coined term, but my fandom started with '09. So the Kelvin timeline movies have such a special place in my heart, and it was such I think we should maybe jump into this at the top of the show before we talk about our overall thoughts. I'll just get this out of the way.
Sure.
Bill posted a poll on Twitter about which movie you preferred out of the three, and I before I had watched it, I clicked '09, I believe, and now I just
You wish you had the vote
it's
back.
tough, yeah, because it is such a um, great episode, but also feels really big too. It does a lot of things. It's got some great action scenes. It's got some powerful emotional stuff, which I'll talk about, which might be my favorite part of the movie. But yeah, it really does everything. It's a Swiss Army knife for sure.
It very much is. I totally agree. AKA Mamel, I see you have a lot you're sharing, and we will double back and touch base on your comments there. But
Perfect.
I would agree with sort of everything you said. I think the calling card for this movie in my mind is its ability to be fresh and new and exciting and very modern, like clearly a product of its time. It's a 2010s, big set piece, science fiction epic, action adventure movie. But it's so comfortable, I think, walking that tightrope between being that, but also being like a loving throwback, retro embracing of a lot of the qualities that the original series and Star Trek in general kind of trademarked. I think it has that comfort zone really well targeted, and I think it walks that line really well. So one of the first things that sort of stands out in my mind, and I'm not sure if this is a note you took or something that you came wanting to talk about, but one of the first things that always kind of takes me aback with Star Trek Beyond is like structurally to place like the big. It's not climactic because it's at the beginning of the movie, but the huge action sequence that sort of defines the movie and is the big marketable event, like the big thing that happens in this movie happens about 20 minutes into it with the big attack on the Enterprise that brings the ship down. It's this big extended long action sequence that sets up what's going to come down the pike, and it really
Yeah.
like puts the movie into motion. Typically, you have a big action scene like that to kind of resolve everything, but to get this movie moving, we have to take the Enterprise down and put the characters into the position that it needs to be
I
in. What do you
yeah.
think of that? And
You talked about structure. I think you're dead on. I think that's definitely it echoes like it feels like just another 45-minute episode, right? How it's structured. I would go back even further though and say how many like you can name dozens of episodes that start with a log entry, and that's pretty much what happens here. Just like in dozens of TOS episodes, TNG episodes, you can name the
yeah,
list goes on. But I mean, it starts perfectly, and then it just slowly builds and builds and builds, and ebbs and flows, and it's just great. I love the structure.
I
Great
do.
point.
I do too. And one of my other favorite things that I always love every time I come back to this movie, and I had forgotten how much it affected me, or how much I appreciated it since it's been such a long time. Uh, I like that this movie opens with and explores the effect that being out in deep space and serving on one of these long missions would have on people, and how it affects people in
Right.
different ways. There's pluses and
Yeah.
there's positives and negatives. There are that opening log that you talked about. It starts with a little sidebar mission that actually factors pretty heavily into the plot. Um,
Yeah.
the Kirk getting this artifact on a diplomatic mission
Hmm.
certainly sets everything into motion. But once you get through that sort of comedic opening, we have a captain's log where Kirk's talking about things feeling episodic and kind of feeling worn down by the day in day out grind of being out in space for such a long time. I love that it's kind of exploring the time that I would imagine happens in between episodes of the shows, like the little stretches
Hmm.
of time that that they're filling with kind of day-to-day just typical work between these
World building
crises
a little
that
bit.
we get in episodes. Yeah, I think it really does make the world feel more real and more lived in and realistic to see, Kirk kind of moping around a little bit and kind of getting a little bored and not knowing that it's what he wants to be doing. And I like the little bit in the log about how, being in space together so long, the crew is like hooking up with each other, and that brings ups and downs. Like, there are things that happen, and that's what would happen.
Yeah.
This is a bunch of young people who probably largely don't have connections back home because they're out in space for 5 years. These are things that are going to happen, and I like the exploration of that. And it's not just in the log at the beginning. I think it sets up the arc that Kirk's going to go through, that Spock's going to go through, with finding their place and making sure that they're on the right track for the next chapter in their lives. I love that. Yeah. So that leading into the big destruction of the ship, that first 25-30 minutes of the movie is like jam-packed. Like, it's an entire episode or an entire movie in just the first act.
Part one, yeah.
It's crazy how much happens in that. I feel like I thought that while I was watching it the other night. It was like 19 minutes in, and I looked at the timestamp, and I was like, wow, there's already like kind of a lot of meat here to chew on from the traditional Star Trek sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other, like, before I have a whole list of like talking points that I want to hit on, but do you have anything you have like eager, like what's on the top of your mind when you think about the movie, having just revisited it?
I mean, there's a lot we can talk about. I think we should just start with your list, and then I will sprinkle in things that I want to talk about as well. I think we should start with your stuff.
Okay. The Yorktown is obviously another huge element here that gets introduced, and it's I think it gets talked about a lot when people talk about Beyond. They talk about the sequence with the ship, flying into it and docking, with the score really swelling. There's big music. That's become pretty iconic in the Star Trek fandom, I think. But the concept of the Yorktown at this giant space station with that was evidently built by all these Federation species and designed as this place where it would be like the most pure form of the Federation, with all these species living together and sharing their ideas. And we don't spend a whole lot of time there, but I love the look and feel of it. It feels like a huge science fiction idea that feels at home in Star Trek and feels, appropriately ambitious in the Star Trek world. And I like that it factors into the story too. That it's not just a stop off. Like that this is that this is something that we're coming back to and is a specific thing that's a wrench in this plot, and is in our adversaries' scope, I guess.
Yeah. The Yorktown is a really cool idea. I like that sequence, like you said, really echoes the motion picture for me a little bit. But it's also, it's everything about it. I love it. I don't know. I wish we could have a show
that approaches it. Yeah. It's it's certainly a big idea that I think really would lend itself to more exploration with like a TV show.
And I love that they kind of went out on a limb with the design of it. I think it's nothing like we've seen in Star Trek before, more or less. But I like that it's not just a cone or just a circle with some cones on. I really like that they went for the snow globe, I guess, like they say in the
McCoy,
movie.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like that it's not a purely more recognizably traditional like Starfleet design either, because I think that would be that would be one way to go. But I like the idea of the Yorktown being this joint venture where it's sort of, in my mind at least, I don't know that it's ever like set on screen, but I think Simon Pegg used to talk about it all the time when he would do interviews for the movie as it was rolling out. But you imagine this place being something that the best of the best from all these Federation species kind of came together to build together, and have it be this joint venture that housed the best of the best and was built by the best of the best. And to me, that's so appropriately Star Trek and so cool. And the fact that it's not something that we saw in the prime timeline, or that, even later on. That doesn't bother me at all. The Kelvin timeline's a different time, a different space. Resources and technological developments came in different, paces and with different priorities in mind. And I think it's appropriately, perfectly Star Trek.
Yeah, it's Star Trek ideals in a space station.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Gene Roddenberry used to call the Enterprise like Starship Earth. Like for all intents and purposes, it's Earth. It's the vessel that the show needs to be a show. But it's really talking about Earth, and Yorktown's kind of the same deal. It's this diverse place of different people, different backgrounds, different ideas, all working together. And what's more Star Trek than that? Yeah. So obviously the movie, we pop off at Yorktown. We get our mission that we're gonna very traditionally Star Trek in a cool way. I think typical, like, there's a distress call. We're gonna go find out what's going on there. Like, it's not too complicated, too cute. It's your typical Star Trek sort of setup to get us off and running. There's a distress call, or there's somebody. There's a survivor of a catastrophe telling us, we got to go find survivors and go deal. So we travel through this nebula, and we come to this planet, Altamid, that is going to be the center of the movie, really. And the ship, like I said, basically gets taken down in the first 20, 25 minutes by these little the swarm of little tiny ships.
Worker bees.
Yeah, which I think is another really cool conceit, something different. I think if you go back and you look at not just the other Kelvin timeline movies, but just Star Trek movies in general, they're all bigger. It's the Borg Cube, it's the Scimitar and Nemesis, it's the Narada, it's the Vengeance. It's always bigger and badder. And, that's standard issue, and that's typical, and that can be done well for sure. But I love the tactical problem that's presented by these teeny little ships. I love the shot of right at the beginning of the battle, shooting phasers, photon torpedoes, and they just kind of fly right through. Like, there's just nothing you can do. There's nothing the Enterprise can do about this. Spock says we're not tactically. He says something to the effect of we're not tactically equipped to deal with this. That feels fresh and new. And again, like I kind of said at the beginning, I think what Beyond does really well is it's fresh and new, but at the same time, it's very, very classic, old school Star Trek. And so the ship gets taken down. Yes, newly comfortable. In a big extended action sequence that involves a saucer separation, which is really cool. The ship gets decapitated, with the saucer section getting ripped off the secondary hull, and the nacelles are torn off.
They're gone.
They're gone. It's so Scotty gets some really classic dialogue, reporting up to the bridge what's happening. And right kind of from the beginning, we get very, very little time in Star Trek Beyond with the crew together, like in their typical places. We get back to it at the end, of course, but at the very beginning of the movie, everybody's kind of in their stations on the bridge. And even in the midst of this attack, even before the ship gets taken down, the crew kind of gets, thrown together, thrown apart. Like they're kind of spaced out. Spock and McCoy, leave the bridge to go deal. With what's going on in the corridors with the attack, and Kirk eventually leaves too. Uhura leaves. Everybody's going and doing, and they're going to be separated for.
I like that
the rest of the
structure,
movie.
Though. It's definitely fun and interesting to kind of separate them, but also work back together to get back to each other. But it also gives each of the broken up groups something to do.
Yes.
And the mark of a good movie or good episode, I think, is where if I'm with one, I'm not wishing I was with another one. So if I'm with Kirk and Chekhov, I'm not wishing I was back with Spock and McCoy or any, whatever combination there is. I don't feel like I want to get back to it. No, it's each storyline, each thread that they're kind of working through is interesting to me. So I think they did a good job here for sure.
Yeah, one of the things I wrote down here was the pairs of the crews of the main characters kind of getting split off, and I completely agree with everything you said. I never feel like I'm wasting time with any of the pairs. I think they all bring some weight to the movie and kind of balances it out. We have Kirk and Chekhov, sort of the captain and the ensign, the extremes together. Trying to go ahead, please.
I mean, each of the pairs is kind of has some. There's more than meets the eye, right? Just full disclosure, spoilers. Kirk wants to leave, Spock wants to leave, but I think they're equally kind of paired perfectly because like it's Chekhov is like this new kind of green, asking Kirk about these things, like when did you suspect her, and all these things, and then on the other side of that coin, Spock gets to get his emotions out and work with McCoy, who's a really emotional guy. So I think Kirk was trying to find that spark again. I think he was definitely burnt out, that I think Chekhov had a little bit. And then I think like Spock and McCoy helped each other with emotionally and things like that. So I think the pairing was just perfect. So
definitely agree.
And I like Scotty. Yeah, and I like Scotty's pairing too. It's all good.
Yeah, we have Spock and McCoy, like you said, who are the classic yin and yang from TOS that I think a lot of people wanted more of in the Kelvin Timeline movies. They wanted to see these two characters together, and we get a ton of it here. And like you said, I think Spock is obviously dealing with some pretty heavy stuff. He's dealing with, obviously the death of Ambassador Spock, the Leonard Nimoy character, the Prime Spock, which is a huge and a breakup. And all this is kind of being, I think, is all kind of framed by his struggle with what to do with Vulcan, kind of the Vulcan people being refugees and not having a set path. Like he genuinely feels like he should be with other Vulcans and producing other Vulcans, kind of like he should be helping to repopulate the species and like being a part of the Vulcan culture, like physically reproducing Vulcans, I think, but more importantly, just being with Vulcans and making sure the Vulcan culture and society stays healthy and moving forward, as opposed to living with humans on a Federation ship, Starfleet ship, light years away from where all this is happening. I think he feels some guilt with what he's doing and what the kind of life he's leading, which is putting pressure on his relationship with Uhura. And then he gets the news about Ambassador Spock that brings home all of the struggles with all of these feelings. So yeah, he's dealing with some heavy emotions, and who better to pair him with than McCoy, who's like the most emotional guy you could put him with, who is constantly dealing with his emotions. But I think that works perfectly. I think of the scene where he's sitting there in the little hut, little structure, and he's telling McCoy about Ambassador Spock dying. And I think you can really see in Zachary Quinto's performance, I think you can basically tell he's talking about Leonard Nimoy even in the dialogue. He's a guy who lived he lived many lifetimes and had all these experiences, and comparing himself to him. Leonard Nimoy, absolutely.
McCoy.
Nimoy. And knowing that Quinto and Nimoy were pretty close and had a history with each other and built a pretty strong relationship leading up to this makes that really credible, and I think it really informs the performance there and really gives it a lot of power. It's some of my favorite stuff in the movie, and I think that's something that we kind of haven't touched on yet, but the use of Leonard Nimoy's death in the years before this movie was released, and kind of, I guess, as it was going into pre-production, that could, to me, and for my money, could have been a movie that could have gone wrong. I think it's kind of a risky choice to incorporate, the death of an actor, or try to drive. It would feel there's a high risk of feeling like you're shoehorning in something that doesn't necessarily need to be there.
Yeah, getting too cute with it. I think it was handled really well
for what it was gonna do. Absolutely, I really do think they couldn't have pulled that off better, and I think it's because it feels natural in terms of what Spock's arc would be at this point, and has been even going back to 09 with the destruction of Vulcan. I think it informs the place we were already kind of going with Quinto's Spock anyway. Like I think it doesn't feel anomalous or like a curveball out of nowhere to have him deal with something like this way. So, and then Scotty, obviously, I know one of the things that our one of our guests here, aka Mamel, is mentioning, and Rob mentioned it too, loving Jayla, who's paired with Scotty, who are both kind of
she's fun.
She's very fun. Yeah. Strong personality, similar to Scotty in the sort of engineer um, characteristics. Very comfortable fixing things, putting things together, keeping things running. Jayla's been
Great dialogue, though.
very
Great
much so.
dialogue. With yeah, she's got some great one-liners. My house is breaking. Take my house. Like she's got some great dialogue too. So
Definitely, yeah. She works really well with Scotty. She's taking care of the Franklin, which is crashed on this planet and is her house, where she takes shelter and protects herself. Very similarly to the way I think Scotty relates right away to the protective instinct to this home, this ship.
To the ship, yeah.
Yep. That's an immediate
There's some
bond.
similarities there.
They can level really quickly. They get each other, and I think in talking about how this movie I think really does work as sort of a retro throwback and a kind of a homage to everything Star Trek wants to be. The Scotty Jayla interactions build to a point where they're realizing they're going to have to go rescue the crew and get Uhura and Sulu and the rest of the crew. And there's this big speech that Scotty gives Jayla, who doesn't want to go because she knows what's out there and knows the threat, about you cannot break a stick in a bundle, and how you're part of a crew now. And like if Star Trek as a whole, like all these shows, all these things is about anything, it's about that. It's about like a crew of people that are diverse and come from different backgrounds and work together, and that's the power. Like that's what we got to get to. And to me, like having this movie come out in 2016, which was the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, it was I think very conscious of that, and I think putting things like that in there feel right, feel appropriate, and feel like they're talking about like this is what Star Trek is. Scotty's telling Jayla like this is how we deal. This is how we do things.
Yeah.
In the 23rd century. Yeah.
I'll mention something.
Sure.
I really love the production design, especially costume design. There were some such like the blue, I don't want to say away missions, but the escape pod outfits. I love those. I love the throwback Franklin stuff. Yeah, and a bunch of other production stuff too. But I want to give a shout out to. I think Thad would be proud. I don't know. I'm not sure Thad's take on the uniforms in this, but I loved everything. So
I love the uniforms. I love the production design. All the production stuff I think is really, really great. I really do think the uniforms are. I love the 09 and Into Darkness ones as well. But these feel more formal, more kind of like.
Yeah, they feel they're sharp. I think.
They're sharp.
That's one thing that I will say about those uniforms. Yeah, they definitely feel sharp to me.
They do. They feel like they're fitted like just perfectly.
Not like pointy, but like it just looks good.
They look. Yeah, they're sharp. Absolutely, that's a great word for them. Yeah. I totally agree with that, and I totally agree with you on the production design too. The Franklin being a sort of retro throwback ship that does echo back to I think the NX-01. A little bit on the outside, especially the design of the ship is clearly a homage to the NX-01 and that era of starships. But the bridge feels like appropriately Star Trek, very, very, what you'd expect to see on the Franklin. And the planet itself, I think the location photography, the way they built this planet up, I think feels very TOS, very classic Star Trek.
It does.
It's but done bigger. It's simple and it's not overly cute and ridiculous. But it's a TOS planet on a big budget. Like I just feel like they figured out like the exact right formula to make
I just
that
want to see
feel
like
right.
an alien dusk sky thing, the green and I'd love to see that at least on a shot. That would be funny.
That would have been
What was I gonna say? There was a lot of Easter eggs in this. Little things that kind of threw back to old Trek. I really love the backstory of the loose cannon captain, which in itself a captain turned evil guy is like one of the oldest tricks in the book for Star Trek. So that's
Very
a trope
much so.
that we've seen before, but I like it because there's some mirroring to Kirk, and I think Kirk needed this to remind him because I think he was a little bit burnt out, like I said. But back to the Easter eggs, there was a bunch. I mean, we could go on forever. Some of my favorites though were they mentioned the Zindi and Romulan War.
Yes, a lot of
The
Enterprise
Mako's,
love.
Mako's got name dropped too, which was cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean a bunch of stuff.
There is a lot of really cool Star Trek stuff, like just Star Trek minutia stuff. I love me. I love anytime Enterprise gets referenced. Discovery's done it a couple times. Beyond does it. Beyond does it fully, like really embraces it and makes it a part of the story. This villain, this adversary, is to me like, and I feel like even in the Twitter comments and the build up to this, I'd asked like, what do you think of Beyond? And I feel like some of the people were. I think the Crawl character, the adversary, the antagonist, can kind of leave people hot and cold. But to me, I think he's perfect. I think it's great. For everything you just said, I think he's a really cool throwback. Again, kind of fitting in with this. It's new, but it's retro. He's a Star Trek captain gone bad, gone rogue, got lost. And I think it's even more perfect because that's exactly like the line Kirk's kind of walking here. He's lost. He feels like
they talk about
kind of on the edge.
Him and the Admiral talk about being captains being lost, and it's such a foreshadow moment when they talk about that before they go on this mission. It's so good.
It is. It's perfect. I think it's really well constructed, really well written, and it feels right. It feels perfectly at home. It's so TOS to come across, a Starfleet captain who I think it makes space feel big and ominous and intimidating. That out here in space, you can get really lost. You can get left behind. You can get never found. And you can feel
the highest
alone.
Pedigree. A starship captain can get lost. It's
you can end up in a
business for sure.
Absolutely, you can end up in a really true no-win scenario, like Captain Edison did, and like some of those other captains in TOS ended up in, and it can set you off in a bad direction, and I think sometimes when it's done well, you can really feel empathetic towards the character, and I kind of do here. He was lost. He didn't really have anywhere to turn, and years of bitterness and being left alone led him to where he ended up becoming. And I think the use of Kirk's arc to kind of mirror it and have it be a service to Kirk's arc and getting Kirk to where he's ultimately going to end up just lines up perfectly. I think it's really well done. So the Idris Elba character, Crawl, Edison, is not a concern for me. It's actually a strength. It's one of the things I like about the movie. The fact that he is in theory, he's a guy who was on the NX-01. He says he was a veteran of the Zindi and Romulan War. That if he fought the Zindi, he was probably on the Enterprise. And to me, that's really cool.
But I'm trying to get my facts straight here. So the that NX ship was older than the or was it newer?
I don't know. That's something I haven't been able to totally get straight.
There were some details. I think it was like they said. Scotty said maybe it was the first ship to go warp 4.
It could go warp 4.
But its registry number was higher than the NX-01. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I am not totally sure, but I've been trying to rack my brain about that since 2016. Since I was sitting there the first time, like, where does this ship fall exactly? Like, how does it?
Yeah.
Is it built for the Romulan War, or like was it? And that's how I am most comfortable thinking about it in like my nerdy Star Trek continuity mindset.
Yeah, it was repurposed as just like a exploratory vessel, but it was built.
Yeah. For the
Romulan War.
Yeah, it's one of the assembly line ships that they built for that. And I like the fact that Idris Elba's character. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. It's just a little funny detail that I don't know. Maybe if they missed, or I'm just mishearing it or something.
No, you didn't mishear it. It's definitely ambiguous, I think, and I'm sure there are people out there who have it figured out and have the date straight and understand it, and we could bring them on and they school us. But I've struggled with the same thing. But in my mind, that makes sense because the Crawl character, Captain Edison, is also repurposed. He's an old Mako who, in the fallout of the Romulan War.
Him and the shipper, very similar.
Yeah, they just repurpose him. They make him a captain because he had a lot of experience and didn't know what to do with him, and they throw him on the ship and tell him to go out in deep space, and you get what you get. He got into a bad situation, and he didn't necessarily go the right way. But I think aka Mamel, mentions that it kind of reminds her of the Sona in Insurrection, the crawl, like the kind of vengeful, angry, bitter, deep bitterness, kind of driving the characters. Definitely is a good comparison. I think Crawl is I think battling a lot of the same demons and negative feelings that Ruafu and the other Sona are in Insurrection. But the Franklin, is obviously a huge factor in the last like third of the movie, I would say. And I love pretty much everything involving it. I love the way they get it off the planet, the jump off of the cliff to get it to...
Are you kidding me?
That's fantastic. I love that. I think that's maybe the most badass Sulu moment that you get in any Star Trek. He's so cool and heroic doing that, and I love it. And then knocking out the fleet with
Mr. Sulu,
so good.
That's cool.
It's very cool. And then knocking out the fleet of drone ships, worker bees.
Yeah, drone ships
with sabotage. I think
a cool throwback. Yeah,
it is, but I think it's definitely one of the kind of like Crawl. I think if you poll people on, what do you think of Beyond? I think the people who are going to be negative on it are probably going to say they don't like Crawl. They don't like the solution. They don't like using the song. Some people find that cringy and corny. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's actually one of the highlights of the movie.
Guy,
me too.
So, it works for me.
It works for me too. I think it's great. I think it feels at home. There's some great cuts, some great like music edits with ramping up, parts of the song at just the right moments. With the imagery. Some really cool. I love Spock and McCoy's exchange about is this classical music. Spock, I believe it is. It's so good. I love seeing Chekhov, tapping his feet, like getting into the song. I just think it's really good. I think it plays perfectly to the little moments like that. Drive home this crew's a family. This is they're tight knit. They're comfortable with each other. That all works surrounding the use of that song, and of course it's a throwback to 09. 09. So, and then obviously maybe my favorite, when I was watching it, I think my favorite moment in the movie, because I just think it's perfectly executed and it's perfectly Star Trek and it's perfectly Kelvin Timeline and Kirk, is the little back and forth that Idris Elba and Chris Pine have, where Idris Elba's talking about what he was born into with war and negativity and darkness, that line, that
was a cool exchange. Yeah, that was really cool.
It is. Kirk saying,
I like that.
Better to die saving lives than to live with taking them, and that's what I was born into, and it is literally what he was born into.
Yeah,
it's just fantastic. It's just great.
Yeah,
that just works on me in every possible way, and like I said, when I was watching it this time, that hit me in a way that was like, that's where this movie is like, that's the crescendo. That's the movie, just like mic dropping. This is great Star Trek.
Yep.
Because that's Starfleet too. That's another thing that you can trace. Like that's in Star Trek. So, do you do you want to see more of this? Like, when you watch this again, do you feel like, because there's a lot of assumptions that, maybe this is it for the Kelvin timeline. Are we going to see these guys again? Is it a trilogy and this is that? Do you feel like you want more? When you sat and watched the end of this, did you feel like it was final? Or do you feel like it's promising more that you really want to say?
Man, that's...
It's probably tough for you because you have a unique bond to these things.
Tough.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to see it go, but it's just like, no, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want it to end. So
No, there's nothing wrong with that.
I will acknowledge that it would be a great ending. These three movies together, I think, are really strong. If I try to find another run of movies, I think might be tough to have three movies like this with three episodes like this. But yeah, I don't want it to end. I'll just be completely honest here. I don't want it to end, but just because I love these characters so much, and I think especially just from an actor standpoint, I feel like these performances are so strong. They feel so comfortable. I think
yeah.
yeah, it would be a shame to be maybe squeeze one more out. I think.
I would
That's
like
just me.
I would like to, because I feel like you just said it. I think a big part of why I love this movie so much is that I feel like these actors are so comfortable in these characters, especially Chris Pine. I feel like Chris Pine playing Kirk in this movie has kind of shed a lot of the, he has kind of a similar arc in '09 and Into Darkness, where it's the growing into himself, maturity, growing into a leader, embracing the role and learning how to be a captain. And in this, he is a captain. Like he's been doing it. He feels like Captain Kirk to me in this, in a way that is unique to this movie. And that's also true of all the other the other actors as well. I think they all deliver really confident, lived-in, comfortable performances. And by this point, I feel so comfortable with them in these roles that it would be a shame for me, because I love these movies to begin
like
with.
right when we get comfortable, like they're gone. That's the tough thing.
Exactly. One of the questions, aka Mammal asked, is who was your favorite character in Beyond? Like, which of the characters do you think is best served in this movie? Who shines the brightest from the ensemble?
It's Kirk.
Kirk. I think it's Kirk too. In this one,
I think Kirk, a little bit of Spock, but I really think it's Kirk. Because I feel like we start I keep saying the episode, but the movie off with a lot of Kirk stuff. He's dealing with a lot. The other characters are too, and they're definitely in there. I really think this is a good use of the ensemble, like you said, but I really think Kirk kind of takes it a little bit.
So. Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think Kirk is has the arc that's the most well drawn, most confidently executed from beginning to end.
But I don't sleep on the Spock kind of storyline. I think I want to talk about this a little bit, but when he gets the personal effects,
yes, we have to go there.
Ambassador Spock. Mm-hmm. Oh my God! Here come the waterworks. Mm-hmm. Every time I cry. It's so it resonates stuff in my life too, and it's just like, man, it's like, because we can keep talking about it, but
no, that was my next. The next thing we got to talk about is the sort of the big moment at the very end with Spock getting Ambassador Spock's effects, and
text me.
And that photo is such a big moment that's become very, I think, iconically tied to this movie. I think it's one of the things that people would cite as I love this movie because of that moment. I think that moment earned a lot of goodwill.
I think that might be my favorite part of the movie, but there's a bunch of parts. But yeah, because I mean, it what ultimately brings them back is each other, and is that photo, and the most important thing, right, is each other and being with each other, and it's just like,
agreed. And I think the use of the choice of the photo being from Star Trek 5 or 6, like late, seeing them older, and that it's not like a crew photo from the original series is key, because it's telling Spock, this is where you need to be. Like, you're going to be your best self with these people. And like, one of the things that I think '09 does really well, and this movie does too, with this moment, is talk about how, some people are just kind of destined to be together. And like, even in different timelines, fate is going to kind of draw people together. And I think as a theme in these movies, kind of charting all through three of them, that moment at the end of Beyond really kind of drives it home. Like, I think that informs Spock's decision, obviously, and tells him, this is your family. Like, you can go to Vulcan if you want, but you're not going to find what you're really looking for there. You know where you need to be.
which I think is really prevalent in the original cast and the original crew.
Sure.
That there's this sense of family within amongst the crew.
Yep.
I think it really becomes like prevalent here and beyond. I think
Very much so,
which I love. Yeah.
And again, I think it's the one of a few themes that is present in all of it, all the shows. I think it's one of the things that ties them all together. That's what it's about at the end of the day. And again, that makes it perfect. I think for all kinds of reasons. The bundle of sticks. Yeah. Yep. This is the family.
Yeah.
It's really, really well done. It's one of the more emotional things you're going to find in all of Star Trek, I think, especially if you're bought in and the history of it and the different casts and if it's in your blood, if you really love it, I think it's really hard not to get the wind knocked out of you by that little picture. So yeah, we have to talk about that for sure. I'm glad we got there.
I knew it was coming, and I
had to.
cried. It was just, it's just,
yeah. It works every time. It really is a real highlight. AKA Mammal asked if Anton Yelchin died shortly before this film was released. Yes, which is really sad. Also, Anton Yelchin is great as Chekhov, particularly in this movie. I think he's got some great stuff with Kirk, with Chris Pine. Definitely one of the sadder things that's ever happened to the Star Trek family. All these casts and shows. She says Spock and McCoy's banter is her favorite part of Beyond, which
good stuff in there.
It's great stuff. Great stuff. It's very traditionally Star Trek. Feels right at home. She expanded on the thought that the Sona and Baku are the same race in Star Trek Insurrection, and that's where the deep bitterness comes from. And obviously, Krall is a human, and there is this deep bitterness and anger. I think that definitely is a great call. Said she loved the song, so she's with us on that. Pine matured into the role. Definitely learned about fate and Into Darkness. Yep, I think fate and destiny are certainly a big theme in all three of these movies. I think. So I think. This movie, I just think, plays with all the Star Trek stuff really, really well. It's comfortable talking about continuity and dealing with all those destiny things and doing things like the photo and calling back to things in the original series. I love that at the end of the day, and I think, again, it kind of is talking about like what Star Trek is with taking this crew, these characters, and stripping them of the Enterprise in the first 25 minutes. Like it's kind of, I think, trying to say, the ships and the technology, that's a big part of this, but at the end of the day, it's about the people. It's about how these people work together.
Strip away everything. Yeah, it's essential. Yeah.
It's the essential stuff, and it's the characters, and it's how they relate to each other, and they're going to have to get out of this without their technology and their resources and their technobabble. Like, they're going to have to be more resourceful than that, and it's going to their best resource is each other. They can't do it alone. And I think that's, again, another big theme in Star Trek that comes back again and again, and I like the way Beyond continues to play with all those traditional things.
I can't not mention it. Visually, this is a masterpiece. It looks great. There's some great visual effects also as well, but there's also some really cool cinematography stuff. There's a great transition that I love. But I love the time lapse of the rebuilding of the ship at the end. You get to see the innards, the decks getting put in, the bulkheads going in. That's cool. I don't have an issue with the time lapse.
No, it's great.
It's tough to integrate that into something so complicated like a feature film, but it works for me. It's amazing. So the looks of this are a knockout as well.
Yeah, it's a great looking movie. We talked about the production design and the costume design. We talked about the score very little bit, but the music's great all the way through. But particularly, I think that the Yorktown theme, the music over the captain's log at the beginning, it's kind of melancholy. I think it's a diverse score. The visual effects, the takedown of the ship, the
epic
stuff in that opening
Yeah.
action sequence. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. We could go on and on. This is one of those movies that one of those pieces of Star Trek that is so loaded with like little Easter eggs, like you kind of alluded to. It's dense. There's a lot. There's a lot. There's a line that Kirk says in the address to the crew when they're going through the nebula about how there's no such thing as the unknown, only the temporarily hidden. That's a line that Kirk says. Corbomite maneuver. That's a piece of Star Trek actual lore. That's a direct pull from an episode. Kirk says that to the crew, and the same thing.
TOS Kirk, he does that. He has done that before. There's speeches where he's not over the intercom, so that's a cool throwback.
Absolutely.
TOS stuff. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Great point.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
It's got that great shot that the TOS does all the time. When he does that, he'll hit the chair and talk to the crew over the intercom.
In his chair. Yeah.
Yep. And it's got the great cutaway of the crew in the corridor stop and look up to listen.
Yeah.
How many times in TOS do you see random crewmen just in the corridor stop and listen to the captain's address? It just gets Star Trek, and I feel like it's concerned with touching on these little pieces of comfortable minutia that I think are just what makes Star Trek Star Trek. Which again, as a 50th anniversary, knowing when it's coming out and when it's arriving, when people are watching it the first time, makes it
just perfect.
Kind of I think you really found
in my mind.
Yeah. So would you say? We're both biased because we both love the Kelvin timeline, and not everybody does.
I know what you're going to ask.
Well, you kind of already said it. You said you wish you had your vote back.
But with a caveat, though, I'm going to steal a line from you, and that you say what your favorite is the one you're watching. The show is your one you're watching. That's what I'm going to say. So the most recent one I've watched, that's my favorite. So
yeah.
I think we should probably save that question for maybe I'd like to in maybe a month or two, to maybe sit down and talk about compare these two, 09, Beyond.
And AKA Mammal loves Into Darkness. She has indicated in this that maybe one of the reasons she's not as big on Beyond is that Into Darkness, she loved it so much that Beyond just didn't quite get there for her. So Into Darkness has its fans too.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah, I think. And I'm not trying to bash Into Darkness.
No, we both. I think we both like it.
I really do. I like it. I just the issues arise in the latter half of the movie for me. But I will.
For me as well.
So.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And yeah, we are in the population of people that really I think is pretty fond of the Kelvin timeline overall.
Fond. Yeah.
So. Yeah, I think we covered it pretty well. I mean, there are things we missed and there are things we could talk more about, but we try to keep these two close to an hour. And like you said, there's no end to this conversation. We will be back to talk more about the Kelvin timeline in the future.
That's right.
Star Trek Beyond, Star Trek Into Darkness, Star Trek 09, collectively all together. The other movies independently, I think we should do at points down the road. I'd like to do 09. You have very interesting stories about why 09 is so special to you. It's the like you said, you were introduced to Star Trek through 09. So there are things to talk about with all these movies. And I don't think they get enough love these days because, like I kind of said at the very beginning, one of the interesting things about this movie and the Kelvin timeline as a whole is I think they've kind of been overshadowed a little bit by so much new Trek.
Time.
That
big time. Yeah.
They were the hot new thing for a while there, but there's new kids on the block at this point.
I'll save that question for later.
Okay. So I think that's going to about do it for us. I think one piece of Star Trek content that I would definitely throw out there as a recommendation is Dan and I both appeared on an old episode of Trek Ranks, probably maybe 2 years ago.
Oh, this is perfect.
It's perfect.
Stars have aligned.
The stars have aligned. We did an episode of Trek Ranks about our favorite Kelvin timeline moments.
Yep.
So we talked about Beyond, Into Darkness, and 09. So we've done it before. Like I said, this is a couple of years ago, and these conversations are always subject to change. Every rewatch, every day that goes by, and our life experiences kind of shapes how we see these things, and it's always fun and interesting to look at them again years and months and however long later. But at that time, we talked about our thoughts on the Kelvin timeline and our favorite things about it. So dive back into the Trek Ranks archive and seek that episode out. I think you'll enjoy it if you're a fan of the Kelvin timeline and you enjoyed this conversation about Star Trek Beyond. Yeah. Any other thoughts for you? Anything you want to throw out there? Any extras?
No, maybe I don't know. The name of the account. Oh, here it is. Neon Visual. That's just I guess it had been. People had seen it before. He has redone visual effect shots. He's superimposed all the ships together. He's done a bunch of stuff. Or she. I'm not sure actually who or what.
Produces stuff.
Produce the stuff. But great stuff. Definitely check that out on YouTube.
Yeah, they're
out there.
Dan had mentioned them to me, kind of off air, and I'd seen some of their stuff, but they're the type that would be able to, with enough money and time, I think remaster, at least the visual effects in DS9 and Voyager, pretty well on their own. They've done some
very high
cool
quality
visual effects stuff. Very impressive for any individual person to put anything like that together, and they certainly do fine work. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, they're a cool thing to poke around and check out their work. All right, so that's going to do it for us this week. We're not going to be live next weekend, but we are going to post an old episode of Trek Live that has kind of been buried over the years on our Facebook page. We do have a Trek Live Facebook page, but it's infrequently updated and very not well traveled. But we had a period of time where we would live stream on Facebook Live for reasons, and we had a really great conversation. This is around the end of 2017, very beginning of 2018, somewhere around there. We had a guest. Her name is Danielle Cagliuso. I used to know how to say it, so I apologize for butchering that last name, but you'll hear it on the show. Danielle joined us to talk about medical ethics in Star Trek. She is a student of such things and is extremely bright, brilliant person in that lane. So if you're interested in a conversation about medical ethics in Star Trek, I can't recommend highly enough checking that out on YouTube this weekend. It'll go live probably at our normal time, Sunday at 10 a.m. As a YouTube video for the first time. A handful of people have seen it on Facebook Live a few years ago, but a lot of people probably have not had the opportunity to check it out. So I would encourage everybody to do so. But we'll be back live hopefully at some point in the next week or so, maybe to talk about some Star Trek Lower Decks. That's premiering on Thursday, just a couple of days from now. We may try to come live on Course Heading, our sister show, where we talk about new Star Trek at some point in the next couple of weeks. But certainly in a couple weekends, not next weekend, but the following, we'll be back with Trek Live content. So stay tuned. Conversation doesn't have to stop here. You can find us on Twitter. Dan at Trek Live, me at TrekFan4387. Our topics will be revealed there, and all kinds of good Star Trek stuff happening on both feeds.
Yep. Had a great time talking some Kelvin timeline. I'm excited to talk about it in the future. Thanks everybody for stopping in. See you guys next week.
Thanks everybody.